Good evening. It's Jimmy here in Chicago. What's going on? Hope everybody's having a good week. Freezing balls here. Stay warm, stay safe. I mean, it's 70 degrees in Florida right now. I want to remind everybody that the vast majority, not all, but most of my YouTube stories that I put out there are all about the major trials that I went to. You see, I was very lucky to attend some of the biggest mob trials in the city of Chicago, going back to the early 1990s to the mid 2000s. Now, I'm not a reporter, I'm not a cop, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a law student, strictly a court buff. There's nothing like being inside some of these major federal trials. For example, behind me, that's an actual photo of a courtroom at the Dirksen Federal. So imagine being in that courtroom and you're 15 feet away from outfit guy Frank Calabrese, or you're 10 feet away from Sam Carlisi. Sadly for me, but it's a good thing for the outfit guys, there are no more mob trials. There's nothing more to write about. The Chicago outfit is over. The story has ended. Like all things in life, nothing lasts forever. And like my dad used to tell me, Jimmy, don't ever feel sorry for these men. And he's right, because the Chicago mob had one hell of a run. They made hundreds of millions of dollars in the rackets, controlled all the unions and politicians, and made hundreds of millions of dollars for decades. Now it's over. All the real outfit guys have passed away or are on the other side. The others are locked up in jail. And the few remaining have all went legit. The stock market, real estate, construction, restaurants, cafes, dispensaries. There's so much money to be made legitimately. So we're going to shift gears now. I'm going to tell you about some trials that I went to that are non-mob related, but yet still interesting. True crime trials. Now, the one trial we're going to talk about tonight, I actually knew the defendants. I actually knew the murderer. It's very rare that I go to a trial and I know the defendants. So we're going to talk about that. I've got more stories coming up. I'm going to drop about corruption and racism going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm going to do a story on the Michael Madigan trial that I just went to. And I'm going to do a story on the Gus Alex and Sam Alex, two of the most powerful men in the Chicago outfit. Those two brothers made 20, 30 million back then. So we're going to get into it. I want to start by promoting my friend's book, Mary Gardner. Mary grew up in the Grand Avenue patch, and she tells a lot of personal, funny stories from a young girl growing up with Joey the Clown Lombardo. How she was kind of like a lookout for Joey. She talks about her love affair with outfit burglar Frank Collada. She even talks about partying, smoking weed with the legendary Bozo the Clown. So great book, easy read. You can easily buy it on Amazon, just under 200 pages. Check it out. Liars, Lovers, and Clowns, Tales from the Patch. And for all you Led Zeppelin fans out there, I highly recommend checking out the new documentary, Becoming Led Zeppelin. I seen this last night, and I gotta say it's one of the best rock and roll docs I've ever seen. Going back to Led Zeppelin early days, you'll see a lot of never before seen concert footage, interviews, photos. I'll never forget, I was very blessed to see Led Zeppelin back in the early 1970s. It was the very first concert I ever went to, and it was at the old Chicago Amphitheater, right there in the old stockyards, not far from Bridgeport, Chinatown, White Sox Park. I mean, I was a kid, right? Early 70s, I think 71, 72. And it was so loud, the plaster was literally falling off the walls at the old amphitheater. But check this out, Becoming Led Zeppelin. You guys won't be disappointed. It's playing at all your IMAX movie theaters. Now, I also want to share with you guys just some of my what I call my wall of fame. In my condo, I got one dedicated wall all to the wise guys. You can see I got Sam Carlisi, Joey Upa, I got John Gotti, uh, Sopranos, Goodfellas, Joey the Clown, the famous Last Supper photo, a scene from The Godfather, another good scene from Goodfellas. I've got these photos. You can get them in colored or black and white, framed or unframed. Whoever donates to my channel will get one of these custom mob guy photos. So let me know if you're interested in something like that. Now we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about. Let me put up my. We're going to talk about this guy here, Danny Williams. Now, Danny Williams, back in 1995, committed a brutal murder. He was high as a kite, drunk as a skunk, pretty much whacked out of his mind in a desperate situation, and he ends up killing a longtime friend of his, a man, an older man that he knew since kindergarten. Kindergarten, that's how far they go back. The victim in this case, the guy we're going to be talking about, Danny's friend, was a good man. His name was John Dove, and he was a teacher or principal at a junior elementary school. I think it was Wilkins, but I'm not sure. But I know he was a teacher. He was in academics. Good guy, close friend of Danny Williams. And this particular trial was at DuPage County. Now, normally, I go to the Dirksen Federal Building. That's downtown Chicago. That's where all your major federal trials are. Occasionally, I'll go to the Cook County Building or maybe the Bridgeview Courthouse. I never recommend anybody going to the Cook County on 26th in California. I never recommend anybody going to the Cook County Court Building or the jail. It's like one of the worst places to visit. But Danny's case was at the DuPage County Court Building. So I went there. I missed the opening statements, but I got there for the closing arguments. And sometimes the close is the best part of the trial. So I'm going to present to you the prosecution's case, and then I'm going to put up what Danny's defense team, what their defense was. So the prosecution started out by saying that Danny Williams coordinated a golf outing, and he took money from several people to plan the golf outing. But Danny either gambled or partied or pissed away the money. And on the calendar, time was running out. The golf outing was coming up, and he didn't have the money for the golf outing. So he was kind of in a desperate situation. They're kind of planning the motive of the murder, which was theft. And now the government and Danny Williams even agreed to this, that Danny Williams and John Dove, they went in on a little binge, I think a 2-day binge, smoking Wiki Sticks, which is basically PCP, angel dust, mixed in with marijuana, and they were drinking heavily. And they binging, drugs, alcohol. That never leads to anything good. They end up going to the casino, and John Dove wins. Won like $1,200, which back then was, a pretty good amount of change. So Danny lost all his money, devastated. John Dove, not expecting to win, end up winning. Probably one of the happiest nights of his life. They go back to the house in Westmont. I think it's like 523 Hamilton. I remember going here 3-4 weeks later after they removed the crime scene tape, because this was the crime scene. This is where John Dove was killed, right there in this house. So they go back to the house. They get into an argument, and Danny Williams chases this man around the house, stabbing him 15 times. You can just imagine when they showed the crime scene photos and autopsy photos in court on the big monitors for the jury to see. Then you look over and you see the defendant there with a smirk on his face. So after Danny Williams stabs his good friend 15 times, he ransacks the house. Now the prosecutor shows this. They show photos of the bedroom, the house, ransacked. But Danny's not done. He grabs a gas can and torches the house. They show the photos of the actual house, the aftermath from the fire. And then one of my favorite parts of the trial, they showed these tire marks, these black screeching tire marks, leaving John Dove's house in Willow Springs. They showed the tire tracks in the driveway and then all the way down the street, showing that after Danny Williams killed this poor man, set his house on fire, he was in a hurry to get the hell out of there. So what does Danny Williams do then? Now this kid, he's never committed a serious crime before. He's definitely never killed anybody before. He's probably panicking. Again, higher than a kite, a wiki stick, drunk, binging, starts calling his friends. Thank God none of his friends answered. One of his friends is my friend, Stevie. Stevie was probably hungover, drunk, and didn't feel like answering the phone. Thank God. Otherwise, he could have been an accessory. So what does Danny Williams do? Now that he's out on the run, he's on the lam, cops are looking for him. He goes on a fucking spending spree with John Dove's stolen credit cards. Food, hotel, alcohol, drugs, etc. Goes on a spending spree. Now, thank God Danny Williams gets caught. Fast forward. Danny Williams is 25 years old. This is in 1997. I go to the trial. Prosecuting just presented the case, everything I just showed you. Now it was the defense team. I've seen some of the best lawyers, some of the best prosecutors, some of the best criminal defense attorneys in Chicago. I've also seen some of the worst. Danny Williams' attorney was one of the worst I've ever seen. So Danny's defense was, he admitted killing the man, but his defense was that Danny didn't need to steal any money because he had a job. Danny wasn't a total lowlife. At least he had a skill. He learned a trade. Danny was a professional painter. This is how I met Danny. I actually, in the summertime, back in the day, would paint houses with Danny. We used to work for my cousin, who was the contractor. Here's a photo of Danny right here. So Danny's defense was, his lawyer said, well, Danny didn't need to steal because his boss, Mr. Rich, the contractor here, my cousin on the left, my other cousin on the right, God bless you, Janice, these are my two cousins, but my cousin Rich was a contractor that Danny used to work for. So Rich, the last thing he wanted to do was drive all the way out to the DuPage County and face Danny and see him in the courtroom. He definitely didn't want to testify and help him in any way in his defense, but my cousin got subpoenaed. So poor Rich had to go there, and on the stand, Danny's lawyer asked Rich, how do you know Danny? He works for me. What kind of work? He paints houses for me. If Danny Williams ever needed money, would you borrow him money? Would you borrow him money? Would you loan him money? And Mr. Rich said, yes, I would. I would loan him money. But he'd have to pay it back. He'd have to work it off. And then a couple people in the courtroom kind of laughed. So Rich was there strictly to testify that if Danny Williams needed money, he would loan it to him. That's how desperate the defense was. And when it came time to cross-examine Rich, the prosecutor said, I have no questions. And what he meant by that was his testimony is minimal. It makes no difference at all in this trial. So Danny Williams' defense team was trying to say that Danny Williams didn't need the money because he had a job and he could always borrow money from his boss. Danny Williams also said in his defense, because Danny Williams took the stand in his own defense, but I wasn't there that day. He said that John Dove made sexual advances towards him. And that in self-defense, they got in a struggle, and Danny ended up killing him. So that's what Danny's defense was, that John Dove, a good friend of his, made some sexual advances towards him. They got in a fight and he killed him. And get this, Danny Williams' lawyer had the murder weapon in his hand, was motioning something, and he made the critical mistake. When he was done, he put the murder weapon on the defense table 8 inches, 10 inches from Danny Williams. Everybody in the courtroom was staring at that knife on the defense table right near the defendant, the murderer. I've never seen anything like that, right? The defense lawyer didn't even realize what he did. Maybe a minute later, the prosecutor didn't want to interrupt him during his close. He walked up to the defense table and very quietly removed the knife from the table and put it on his table. But I couldn't believe that Danny Williams' lawyer would take the murder weapon and set it so close to the actual murder. Now, fast forward. Again, this is right around May, I think, in 1997. Judge Ronald Mealing was the judge that presided over Danny's trial. And he's the same judge during the Roland Cruz case. That happened years ago. That beautiful young girl, Jeannie Nicaro, was murdered. So he was the same judge. He's the one that sentenced Danny Williams. The jury found Danny Williams guilty. I mean, the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecutor was asking the judge to give Danny Williams 60 years. This man right here, Ronald Mealing, he gave Danny Williams 36 years in prison. This is a photo of him taken as a retirement party. And I heard, you'll have to fact check me on this, I heard a federal judge in Illinois gets a $100,000 a year pension for the rest of his life. So not a bad gig, right? What do you guys think? So Danny Williams was found guilty of murdering John Dove. The judge gives him 36 years in prison, right? 36 years. Danny does his time. Somehow, some way, he survives. And he's home today. That's right. He's a free man. I asked him. I'm trying to get him on for an interview because I have about 25 questions I want to ask him. But I want to see if he's remorseful. But he told me that while he was in prison, one of his hustles, one of his jobs was a painter. Now, there's a lot of painting that's needed in prison, right? So here's a recent photo of Danny Williams. He's probably in his early 50s now. And I hope and pray that he made peace with John Dove's family. I hope he made peace with God. And I hope and pray, Danny Williams, if you're listening, that you're remorseful. You're a very lucky man to be free. There's men, a lot of wise guys and associates that are doing decades in prison for a lot less crime. They didn't kill anybody, and they'll probably never get out of jail. Here's a guy, even though I know this kid, kills his friend, 15 years, blows trial, gets convicted. They were asking 60. He gets 36. He does the 36 and is a free man today. So I hope to God you're behaving yourself, Danny. Now let's do a little recap, right? This was the murder of John Dove, school teacher, principal. He knew Danny Williams since Danny was in kindergarten, right? These guys go on a binge, PCP, smoking Wiki sticks, drinking heavily. They go to the casino. Now, they don't build these casinos because they're losing money, right? Danny Williams is desperate. Why is he desperate? The motive. Theft. He plans a golf outing, collects all kinds of money, blows the money, and now he doesn't have the money for the golf outing. So he desperately needed to come up with some money fast. What he should have done was just explain to the guys that he didn't have the money and somehow, some way he'll pay him back. Or he could have went to somebody in the neighborhood, a family member, a friend, maybe they would have loaned him money. So these guys go to the casino. Danny, of course, loses. Probably one of the lowest points of his life, higher than a kite. And John Dove wins. John Dove wins $1,200. He's ecstatic. They go back to the house. They get in an argument. Prosecutor said that Danny Williams chased him around the house, stabbed him 15 times. Crime scene was horrific. Danny ransacked the house, took a can of gas, set the house on fire. They showed the tire tracks screeching out the driveway and the side street. And then Danny went on a spending spree. Now, getting back to the defense, my cousin's testimony really didn't mean much, meaning he gave Danny a job. If Danny ever needed money, Mr. Rich would make him work it off. That really fell on deaf ears. Danny's alleged charge that John Dove made sexual advances to him. The prosecutor said, listen, I wasn't there. I don't know what John Dove and Danny's relationship was. For the record, John Dove was gay. He was a gay man. And him and Danny were friends for, like I said, many years. So who knows what was going on? meaning the prosecutor said, I wasn't in the house. I don't know if John Dove made sexual advancements to Danny. But he reminded the jury, this is what I do know. And they showed an autopsy photo of John Dove's, I think it was his larynx or esophagus. They cut it open and spread it out, and it was pitch black. And the prosecutor said in his closing argument that it wasn't the fire that killed John Dove. It wasn't the 15 stab wounds that killed John Dove. He was still alive. It was the smoke from the fire is what killed him. So when they showed that graphic photo of the man's throat slit open, completely blackened from the smoke, that's what killed John Dove. So that's what the prosecutor said to combat the fact that Danny allegedly, was molested by this guy. But if the guy was an older gay man and you got a little creepy kid like Danny Williams smoking wiki sticks, getting all fucked up, they've known each other for years, who knows what kind of P. Diddy love relationship these two guys got. But that said, Danny Williams does 36 years in prison, spends his time painting, somehow survives. I'm trying to get him on the show for an interview because I want to see if he's really remorseful. Here's a great photo. You got the sunset. He caught a fish. He's got some new clothes. Still looks the same. I hope to God he gets the counseling and help that he needs, and I hope he shows remorse. But Danny Williams stabs a friend 15 times, does 36 years in prison, and somehow is a free man. Talk about how messed up our court system is. There's wise guys and other defendants, criminals that are doing decades in jail for a lot less. If you guys like my little story about the murder of John Dove, if you've heard about it, enter in your comments, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. And then I'm going to share another story with you later on in the week about another little scumbag that I knew that ended up killing somebody. That's 2. Have a good night, guys. Ciao.